They laughed when security escorted me out, and today I watched that same room go silent when they realized I own everything.
But because nobody flinched after it. Not my father, not my uncle, not even my own cousin who used to borrow money from me every other week. They just stood there, looking at me like I was already gone, like I had already stopped existing the moment they decided I wasn't useful anymore. And then my father said it, calm, cold, like he was talking to a stranger on the street. Pack your things. You're leaving this house today. No shouting, no argument, just a final decision. And the worst part, I didn't even look surprised, because deep down, I think I knew this moment was coming. My name is Ion. I'm 28. And if you asked anyone in that house who I was back then, they would have said something like, yeah, he's the quiet one. Doesn't do much. Kind of useless, honestly. Useless. That word followed me everywhere. At family dinners. At gatherings. Even in casual conversations like I wasn't sitting right there. They didn't even bother lowering their voices anymore. Because, in their mind, I wasn't someone worth hiding opinions from. But what they didn't know, what none of them ever bothered to check, was that the house they were standing in, the living room they were shouting in, the same roof they were kicking me out of, legally belonged to me. Not partially, not shared, fully. But I didn't say that. Not then. Not when they were all gathered like judges in a courtroom. Not when my uncle was smiling like he had finally sorted me out. Not when my father looked at me like I was a disappointment he could finally remove from his life. I just stood there, quiet, holding a small backpack, because that's all they gave me time to pack. It started earlier that evening. Small things first. That's how these moments always begin, not with a scream, but with build-up. My aunt was the first one to snap. She always had something to say about me. Always. That night, she pointed at me during dinner and said, "You're almost 30 and still doing nothing with your life. Honestly, what are you even contributing here?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I already knew where this was going. My cousin laughed. Not loudly, just enough. "That's true, though," he said. "He just sits around. Doesn't even help properly." My father didn't stop them. He never did. He just kept eating. Like I wasn't even part of the conversation. And that was the moment something inside me shifted. Not anger. Not sadness. Something more final. Like I was watching a decision being made without me. A decision about my own life. After dinner, I went to my room. Small, bare, quiet. The only place in that house where I wasn't being evaluated every second. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my phone. No messages. No calls. Just silence. And then I thought about something I had been ignoring for years. Something buried under routine disrespect and constant humiliation. The house. People think ownership is obvious. That whoever lives somewhere must be the owner. But in families like mine, nothing is ever that simple. Especially when money, inheritance, and ego are involved. 2 years earlier, my life looked very different. I wasn't useless. At least not on paper. I had just come back from completing my degree abroad. Business administration. I had job offers, connections, options. But instead of leaving immediately, I stayed. Because my mother asked me to. And because at that time, I still believed family meant something permanent. The house wasn't originally built by my father. It was bought through a combination of my grandfather's savings and my mother's side of the family. But when things got complicated legally, it was put under my name, not because I demanded it. Because I was the only one with the clean documentation, eligibility, and financial background at the time to handle it. My father agreed. My uncle agreed. Everyone agreed. Because at that time, it was just paperwork. Nobody thought about respect, or power, or what it would mean later. And then slowly, things changed. I stayed in the house, helped with expenses, covered bills, fixed things when they broke, took care of maintenance, even paid for renovations when the roof started leaking during monsoon season. But somehow, none of that counted, because in their eyes, contribution wasn't about money. It was about attitude. And mine was never loud enough, Never dominant enough, never useful enough in the way they respected. That's the thing about families like mine. They don't measure value in action. They measure it in ego. So the narrative formed over time. Slowly, quietly, dangerously. He doesn't do anything. He just lives here. He's lucky we even allow him to stay. And the worst part? They started believing it. Fully, completely, without question. That evening, I heard them talking in the living room, not bothering to lower their voices. Because why would they? I was already nothing in their eyes. My uncle's voice carried through the hallway. He needs to leave. He's becoming a burden. My aunt followed immediately. He doesn't even contribute like a proper son should. Then my father, calm, final, we'll tell him tonight. And that's when I knew this wasn't an argument anymore. It was a decision, already made. I was just being informed. I sat there for a while, staring at the wall, not moving, not reacting, not thinking in emotions, just processing facts. Because when people show you who they are, you don't always react immediately. Sometimes you calculate. At around 10 p.m., my father knocked on my door. 2 knocks. No greeting. No hesitation. Just authority. "Come out," he said. I already knew what was waiting outside, but I still opened the door and walked out. The entire family was in the living room, standing, waiting, like they had rehearsed it. My aunt was near the sofa, my uncle by the window, my cousin leaning against the wall like this was entertainment, and my father in the center. He didn't waste time. "You're leaving this house today." Simple sentence. Heavy weight. No emotion attached. My aunt added immediately, "We've tolerated you long enough." My cousin laughed again. "Honestly, this is overdue." I looked at all of them, one by one, and I noticed something interesting. None of them looked uncertain. None of them looked guilty. They all looked relieved, like they were finally removing something unwanted. That was the moment I realized something important. This wasn't anger. This was comfort. They felt safe doing this. Safe humiliating me. Safe removing me. Because in their minds, I had no power to respond. My father threw a small bag onto the floor. "Pack your essentials. That's all you need." I didn't move immediately. Not because I was going to argue, but because I was observing something I would never forget. The ease, the confidence, the assumption that I had no fallback, no support, no authority, no place to stand. They were wrong, but I didn't correct them. Not yet. Instead, I nodded once, just once, and said, "Okay." That single word confused him slightly. My aunt frowned. "That's it?" My cousin smirked. He finally understands. My father looked at me for a moment longer than the others, like he expected resistance. But when he didn't get it, he turned away, dismissed me mentally. Already done with me. I walked to my room, slow, controlled. No panic, no rush, because the moment you rush in situations like this, you give them control over your reaction. And I wasn't doing that. Not anymore. I packed quietly. Clothes, documents, a few personal items. Nothing emotional, nothing unnecessary. Because deep down, I already knew I wouldn't be gone for long. And that's when I noticed something small. Something they didn't think mattered. The house documents drawer in my room, half open, like someone had been searching through it earlier. My father, or my uncle, trying to confirm something, trying to reassure themselves that they had done nothing wrong, that I had no leverage, that everything was simple. They didn't realize what they were actually touching, what they were actually sitting inside, what they were actually trying to push out, because the truth was sitting right there in paperwork. In registration documents, in legal ownership records, in my name. I closed the drawer, didn't react, didn't interrupt their celebration outside, because I could hear it now. Laughter, relief, even jokes. They thought the problem was solved. They thought they had removed uselessness from their home. They thought they had won. But I was already thinking ahead, not about revenge yet, not about confrontation, not even about anger, about timing, about documentation, about confirmation, about what happens when people celebrate too early. I picked up my backpack, slung it over my shoulder, and walked out of the room. When I entered the living room again, they were still standing, still relaxed, still satisfied. My father didn't even look at me properly this time. Done. I nodded. My aunt waved her hand slightly. Good. Then go. Like dismissing someone from a room they never belonged to. My cousin didn't even bother hiding his smile. Finally peaceful. And I walked toward the door. Slow, controlled, measured. But right before I stepped out, I paused, just for a second, not to speak, not to argue, not to warn them, just to remember this moment, exactly as it was. The confidence, the ignorance, the comfort, the mistake. And then I left. The door closed behind me, softly, almost politely, and in that moment, standing outside in the night air, holding a backpack in my hand, looking at the house they just threw me out of, I finally understood something very clearly. They didn't kick me out of the house. They kicked me out of their illusion, and that illusion was about to collapse completely. I didn't go far that night, not because I had nowhere to go, but because I needed distance. Physical distance makes people think you're broken, but mental distance? That's where planning begins. I sat in a small 24-hour cafe about 10 minutes from a house. Dim lights, old wooden tables, a slow ceiling fan making a faint clicking sound every few seconds. Normal place. Nothing special. The kind of place where nobody looks twice at you. And that's exactly why I chose it. I placed my backpack beside me and ordered a cheap tea. Didn't touch it for a while. Just sat there, replaying everything. Not emotionally. Logically. Like I was reviewing footage of a situation I didn't want to repeat. You're leaving this house today. My father's voice. Cold. Final. Clean. No hesitation. No discussion. Just execution. And then my aunt's face. Not angry. Relieved. That was the word that kept coming back to me. Relieved. Like they had been waiting for this moment for a long time. But the strangest part? I wasn't shocked. I wasn't even surprised. Because deep down, I had seen this shift happening for months. The tone changes. The small humiliations. The way they stopped asking me for opinions and started assigning me labels instead. Useless. Extra. Temporary. People don't wake up one day and decide to kick you out. They slowly convince themselves you were never needed in the first place. I took a sip of tea. Cold already. Didn't matter. Then I pulled out my phone. Scrolled to a contact I hadn't called in months. A name I saved under something boring. Just a simple label. Legal. I stared at it for a few seconds. Not because I was unsure, but because once you make that call, there's no pretending anymore. No, maybe this is a misunderstanding. No, let it settle. Only facts. I pressed call. It rang twice. Then a calm voice answered. Mr. Ayan? Yes, I said. Short, controlled. I think I need to review property documentation. There was a small pause on the other end. Not confusion. Recognition. Like they already understood what kind of call this was. Which property? I looked out the cafe window, at nothing in particular, and said, the one in my family. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, I'll send everything to your secure file in 10 minutes. That was it. No questions. No emotional reaction. Just process. I hung up and leaned back in my chair. And for the first time that night, something shifted. Not emotionally. Strategically. Because now this wasn't just about being kicked out. Now it was about verification. While I waited, my mind went back. Not to the argument, but to years ago. To paperwork. To signatures I never really paid attention to at the time. Because when you trust family, you don't always read every line carefully. You assume good faith fills in the gaps. Big mistake. My phone buzzed. Email notification. Subject line. Property ownership summary. I opened it immediately. Scrolled. And there it was. Clear. Unmistakable. Legal ownership registered under my name. Not partial. Not shared. Fully mine. I stared at it for a while. Not because I didn't know, but because seeing it in black and white hits differently. Paper doesn't lie. People do. Then I kept reading. history of ownership transfer, original purchase agreement, inheritance linkage, legal confirmation of registration. All of it clean, all of it intact, all of it unchanged, for years. And then something else caught my attention. A note, small, almost hidden in legal commentary. No record of ownership dispute or transfer challenge from any family member. I laughed, not loudly, just once, under my breath. No dispute. Of course there wasn't, because in their mind, they were never supposed to question it. They were just supposed to benefit from it. They didn't even think it belonged to someone. They thought it belonged to the family. And in their version of reality, that meant whoever controlled the space emotionally controlled the house. But legally, it didn't work like that. I closed the laptop slowly and sat there for a moment, letting it settle, because now I had confirmation, not emotional truth, not memory, legal truth, and that changes everything. Around midnight, I went back to my place. Not the house I was kicked out of, a small rented room I kept on the side, not because I needed it, but because I liked having options. I didn't sleep. I couldn't, not because I was stressed, but because my mind had already moved ahead, several steps ahead. What happens when they wake up tomorrow? What happens when they feel fully in control? What happens when they assume I've accepted defeat? That was the interesting part, because people reveal the most when they feel safe, not when they're scared. The next morning, I didn't go to the house, didn't call anyone, didn't send messages. I waited, and just like I expected, the first message came from my cousin, around 9:13 a.m. Short, confident, almost mocking. You settled somewhere? Hope you're managing. I didn't reply. Then another message. My aunt this time. This is for the best. You'll learn independence. That tone, that fake kindness, the kind people use when they believe they've done something good by removing you. Still no reply from me. Then my father. No message. Just silence, which told me more than words ever could. He considered the situation closed. By afternoon, things in their house went back to normal. I knew that without being there, because I knew how they operated. The relief phase, the celebration phase, the we fix the problem phase. My cousin probably joked about it. My aunt probably cooked like nothing happened. My father probably acted like he restored order. And that was the exact moment I needed. Because confidence always creates blind spots. Always. That evening, I made another call. Not to legal, not to family, to a different contact. One I hadn't used in a long time. A property registry consultant. Someone who had helped with updates years ago. I said only one thing. I want full certified copies of ownership records. And I want them printed. He didn't ask why. He didn't hesitate. Just replied, ready by tomorrow. And that was it. Now I had something physical, something undeniable, something you can place in someone's hand and watch their confidence collapse in real time. That night, I sat alone again, thinking about the moment they kicked me out, the ease of it, the satisfaction, the certainty. They didn't even check what they were throwing away. They just assumed I was disposable. And that assumption was about to cost them everything. But I still wasn't ready to confront them. Not yet. Because revenge isn't about reacting, it's about timing. And timing requires patience. So I waited one more day, let them breathe, let them settle deeper into comfort, let them fully believe the story they created. Because the deeper someone believes a lie, the harder the fall when reality hits. And by the time I was done, they weren't going to argue. They weren't going to negotiate. They were going to understand one simple truth. They didn't kick me out of a house. They kicked me out of a system I controlled from the beginning. And they never bothered to check. The document arrived in a plain brown envelope. No branding, no urgency, no drama, just paper. And somehow that made it worse. Because real destruction doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly and waits for you to open it. I stood outside the house for a few seconds before going in. Same gate. Same walls. Same sound of the metal latch that used to feel like home when I was a kid. But today, it felt like stepping into someone else's mistake. Through the window, I could already hear them. laughter, normal conversation, teacups clinking. They had already moved on, already settled back into comfort, like nothing had happened, like I was a chapter they had closed too easily. I pushed the door open. No knock, no warning, just entered. The living room went quiet almost instantly, not fully silent at first, just gradual, like sound itself was realizing it didn't belong anymore. My aunt was the first to react. Oh, that one word. Confused, annoyed, like I had shown up somewhere I wasn't invited. My cousin smirked slightly. Came back already? He leaned back on the sofa like he was watching entertainment. My father didn't say anything at first, just looked at me, longer than usual, trying to read what I was doing there, trying to figure out the angle. I didn't speak immediately. I placed a brown envelope on the table, slowly, deliberately, no rush. That got their attention. My aunt frowned. What is that? I didn't answer her. I looked at my father instead, then said calmly, Open it. My cousin laughed. This again? What? You got some emotional speech prepared. No one stopped him, because they still didn't feel threatened. Not yet. My father finally reached for the envelope, opened it, pulled out the documents, started reading. At first, his expression didn't change, just scanning, then slowing down, then stopping completely. I watched his eyes, because that's where it happens, not in words, in recognition. My aunt leaned forward. What is it? Some drama again. My cousin tried to peek, but then my father spoke. Low, controlled, but different. Wait. Just that. One word, and the room changed again. He flipped the page. Read another section. Then another. His hand tightened slightly around the paper. Not shaking, just pressure. My uncle's voice came in from the side. Is it something legal? No one answered him immediately, because my father was still reading, still processing, still trying to find an interpretation that made sense. Then he said it, quietly, like he didn't want to believe it himself. The house isn't his name. Silence, not emotional silence, structural silence, like the room forgot how to function for a second. My aunt blinked. What? My cousin stopped smiling. Just for a moment, my father repeated it, a little slower this time. The house is legally registered under Ayan's name. Now the confusion started. Fast. Visible. My uncle stood up. That's impossible. My aunt shook her head immediately. No, that must be a mistake. My cousin laughed nervously. Okay, this is some kind of joke, right? But nobody laughed back. I finally spoke. Calm. Simple. It's not a mistake. That's when her eyes turned to me, properly now, not as someone being dismissed, but as someone they suddenly needed to understand. My father looked up from the papers. For the first time, uncertainty. You never said anything. I nodded slightly. I didn't need to. That hit differently. Not loudly, but enough. My aunt's voice sharpened. But we've been living here for years. I didn't react. Just watched her. My cousin stepped forward now. So what? It's family property. I tilted my head slightly. That's not what the registry says. That word, registry, that's when it started to land. Because now it wasn't opinion. It wasn't emotion. It was system. My uncle grabbed the papers, started reading himself, faster this time, more desperate, like he could force a different outcome by reading it differently. But paper doesn't bend for ego. My father finally sat down, slowly, like something had taken weight out of him. Not collapse, just realization. My aunt wasn't ready to accept it yet. This doesn't mean anything, she said quickly. He probably manipulated something. I looked at her, not angry, just tired of the assumption. You think I manipulated government records? Silence, because even they knew how weak that sounded. My cousin tried again. But you were kicked out. You left. I nodded. Yes. Pause. From my own house. That sentence didn't need volume. It just needed timing. My father looked up again, now fully aware of what was happening. So what do you want? That question came out differently. Not commanding anymore. More careful. I placed my hands in my pockets, looked around the room, the same room they had stood in when they decided I was useless, the same room they had laughed in, the same room they thought they controlled. And I said, I want you to understand something. Pause. This house was never yours to give away or take over. My aunt scoffed. So you're throwing us out? There it was. Fear disguised as anger. My cousin stepped forward again. You wouldn't do that. We're family. That word, family, always appears when consequences arrive. Never before. I looked at him. Calm. No, I said, you're occupants. That changed the room. Instantly. My father stood up again. This is not necessary. We can resolve this properly. Now he was trying to control tone, shift direction, turn damage into negotiation. But it was too late for that, because I wasn't improvising. I was executing. I pulled out my phone, opened a file, then turned it slightly so they could see. Certified ownership record, legal confirmation, time-stamped registry entry, everything matching, everything official, no loopholes, no interpretation, no argument. My aunt's voice dropped slightly. This is cruel. I almost smiled, not because it was funny, because of how late that realization came. Cruel, not when they kicked me out, not when they called me useless, not when they laughed. Only now. My cousin spoke softer. What happens now? That was the first real question. I answered it immediately. The house returns to its rightful control. Pause, and you leave. No shouting, no emotional breakdown, just structure. My father stepped forward, trying one last angle. You're making a mistake. This will destroy the family. I nodded slightly. No, pause. You already did that part. Silence again. My aunt looked around the room like she expected someone to fix it. No one did, because there was nothing to fix anymore. Only consequences. And then the final piece, the one they weren't prepared for. I placed another document on the table. Official notice. Legal enforcement draft. Prepared in advance. My father didn't even pick it up immediately. He just stared at it, like he already knew what it meant. My cousin whispered, "What is that?" I answered without looking at him. Eviction notice. That word hit harder than anything else, because now it wasn't theory. It wasn't confusion. It was timeline. My aunt finally broke. No, this can't happen. Where will we go? Her voice changed completely now. Fear without filter. And that's when I said the last thing. Calm. Final. No one asked where I would go. That silence lasted longer than all the others. My father lowered his head, slightly, not defeated, just processing the full weight of what they had done, because now it was clear, not just ownership, not just legality, not just power, but timing. They didn't lose the house today. They lost at the moment they decided I didn't matter. I turned toward the door. No celebration, no anger, no speech, just movement. Behind me, I heard my aunt again. My son, please. But I didn't stop, because that version of me they were calling back was the same one they threw out. I stepped outside, closed the door, quietly, and for the first time in a long time, the house didn't feel like theirs. It felt like mine again, and they finally understood something too late to change anything. They didn't kick me out. They kicked themselves out of a place they never owned.